The Joe Rogan Experience.
Train by day, Joe Rogan podcast by night, all day.
How are you, sir?
I'm just fine, Joe. How are you today?
I'm great. It's very nice to meet you.
Yeah. Well, it's great meeting you. You know, I've been getting email over the last 5 years. It says, hey, Tom, you need to be on the Joe Rogan Show. Tom, why haven't you been on the Joe Rogan Show? And I get that. And I say, hey, guys, you just don't walk into the Joe Rogan Show and say, hey, here I am. I want to talk to Joe. You guys are going to have to write Joe and see if you can't get him to invite me. Well, something happened. Either one of those got to you or you just found out about it on your own. But I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here, too. I pretty much found it organically. I think someone suggested it. I think people have suggested it over the years, your books. And then I started reading one, and I got very interested in it. I was like, wow, this is pretty crazy. Like, well, let's just get people to the beginning of My Big Toe. How did you first begin with the research?
Well, actually, it all started while I was in graduate school, working on my PhD, and I was, I'd passed all my tests and everything, so I was doing research. And the research I did was experimental nuclear, but it was low energy nuclear. And we had this big, like 4 or 5 story tall Van de Graaff generator that produced the high-speed particles. Now that's different from the high energy particle, which is hugely expensive. And you wait in line for long times to get on one of those accelerators. But this was owned by the university. And when that machine was working, you took data. And if you were awake for 3 days in a row taking data, well, that was just one of the prices you paid. Because if you stopped, I got to go to bed, there's a good chance that the machine would break and it wouldn't be working when you got back. So if it was working, you stayed with it. And I saw this ad on the door that said, learn how to meditate. And it had a bullet point, and then one of them jumped out at me and said, you can get by with less sleep. I said, I need that. So I went and took my banana and paid $25, a special student price, and learned how to meditate. And it turned out it was a natural for me. Very first time I tried, I thought I had been sitting there for maybe 10, 15 minutes. Got up when somebody tapped me and said, it's time to go. And I thought, just started. And it turned out I'd been there like an hour and a half. And it's like, I just lost part of my life. This is amazing. And from then on, every time I meditated, it was sort of like that. I would get deep in it instantly and had a lot of interesting things going on. And one day, I was sitting there in the meditation, and then I started thinking about the software I was writing. And back in those days, those days were in like the middle to late 60s. In those days, the computer was one computer for a whole university, and it took up probably 10,000 square feet, and it was probably about 1/100th as powerful as the one that's in your cell phone. And there were no debug programs. There was nothing. You put in, you run, and they send it back with a message that says, it bombed. That's all the output you got. So maybe you'd get part of a printout if it got to some of your print stations. So that was back in the old days when working with a computer was a lot more problematic than it is then. So I was just thinking about it. I had some things bomb and didn't know why, and I was searching through my card deck. If you think back that far when computers were fed by punch cards. And it was really hard to debug because, some of the problems weren't even real problems with your code, but the hole was a little off-center. The card punches were all mechanical things, and they wore out. And they had cans and gears and stuff, and they could punch off a little off-center, and the machine would throw it out. And all you get is a message that says, good job, didn't run, it bombed. So I started thinking about it, and when I did, I saw in my mind, I saw this roll, just like coming off a roll, and there was my programs coming down there. And then I saw one that was red. Most of them were black on white, like you'd expect. It's like looking at a printout. And it would go through my card deck. And you see when it's red, and I stop it. and I'd look at it and note it. And then I'd find the next one. I found like 3 or 4 of them. And then next time I got back in the lab, I looked at those cards and I found errors on them. And I said, oh, shit, what's going on? Now I'm a young 26-year-old physicist, and in my mind, reality is create. Reality can be defined as in an operational state. If you can operate on it, you can do something with it, you can interact with it, then it's real. If you can't, it's not. And that's, of course, a materialist viewpoint. That material stuff is real. Stuff that's not material is either not real or irrelevant because you can't interact with it. So that's the point. So when I got that startled me, and I started to play with it more. And I found some errors that indeed were card punch errors. And I thought, that's not even errors in code. How do I know that that card has a punch error? Because it's very hard to tell. When you look at it, they all look fine. You can't tell something that's a 1/10 of a millimeter out of line. But I realized, geez, there's a whole other part of reality that has to do with consciousness that I don't know anything about. I'm a physicist. Physicists model reality. That's what they do. And here I was, right in my face. There's another part to reality that's consciousness-centered. So that's really where it all started. And then some years later, I left graduate school, I took a job. My boss tosses me a book called Journeys Out of the Body. I've been around. He said, hey, we found it. Read. First he said, read the book, tell me what you think. So I read the book and I said, is the guy making it up to sell books? Or is it real? If it's real, wow, because I've had this other experience and I knew things of the mind could be, were real.
This episode is brought to you by Visible. You know how most wireless plans feel like they're designed to confuse you? Hidden fees, weird subcharges, family plans you don't even want. Not with Visible. On the Visible plan, it's one line of unlimited 5G data for just $25 a month. Flat rate, no surprises, powered by Verizon's network, so you know it's solid. And here's the kicker, they're all digital. You can manage your plan in the app or online, meaning no stores, no pushy salespeople, just you and your phone. And right now, Visible's got an insane deal. Use promo code ROGAN by January 31st, and you will get the Visible plan for just $20 a month for 25 months. That's $5 off every month for over 2 years. So go to visible.com/Rogan and check it out. It's wireless made simple. Terms apply. See their website for the details. Can I bring you back to that experience?
Yeah.
So you're meditating, and in meditation, you saw errors in the code that you couldn't see physically with your eyes.
Right.
And you had been working on this for how long at this point?
Oh, I was probably in year 3 or 4.
So you're
in graduate school.
deeply engrossed in this work.
Yes.
This is occupying your mind
Exactly.
all day long. And some other area of consciousness had perceived errors that were indiscernible through your eyes.
Shine in darkness.
Dude, I had to switch. I had to
Yes.
skip them
the
down.
things that, when you look at, when you're looking for errors and you have to look through one card at a time through 2,000 cards, it's tedious and it's long. So I'm sitting there, and in my mind I'm thinking, oh man, my job, bombed. What is it? What card is it? Which, what's the problem? So I put that. It's kind of, I didn't intend to, but just thinking about it, I put that intent out there. And when I put that intent out there, I started seeing my lines of code. And it's like, what's that? Oh, I recognize that. That's my code.
And was it all accurate? Like, did you see anything that wasn't incorrect?
No, it was always accurate. And that was like hitting a hard-headed physicist with a sledgehammer. It was always accurate. Matter of fact, I got so good at it, people were asking me, Tom, could you look at my code and help me debug it? Because I was doing much better than the average guy.
Was that working with other people's code as well? Things that you weren't familiar with?
I didn't try that. I always said no, because I had no idea.
Right, you were working with magic.
I was working. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to break the spell.
What was the attitude around the other scientists when you were describing these experiences that you had?
I didn't describe those experiences I was having. When you're a physicist, you don't tell people things like that. It's impossible. And everybody knows it's impossible, so you don't go around talking about things that are impossible happening to you, because that's not
Right.
That's not good. So I kept it to myself. No, not good for business. So when other people say, well, can you help me? I really don't have time to help you, because I wasn't going to tell them what was going on. That was,
so what did you tell them? Like, did you come up with some sort of excuse, or how you were able to do it?
No, I wasn't really in a group. Each person's doing their own research in their own way at their own time, writing their own software, writing their own programs, and so it's an individual thing. I didn't really interact with it. And you know how it is when something happens and you have no idea why or how. You don't want to break it.
Right.
You don't want to mess with it. You don't want to jinx it.
Right.
You don't want to do anything that makes it go away, because this was the most valuable tool that I'd ever run across. And I could just do it in my mind. And that got me wondering. And like I say, I thought, well, there's another whole bunch of reality that's out there. And I didn't even know it was there. But I want to learn about it. I'm a physicist. I want to model reality. And I've been living in a subset of reality. There's more. And that stuck in my mind. So when I got to this job and they mentioned Bob Monroe, I never heard of him. I read the book, but I was like, wow, that's interesting, because at that point I knew the mind could do some very unusual things. And I was lucky that they found out that he was only about 45-minute drive from where I was working. We all got in the car one day and went out to see Bob Monroe. And my point was, is this guy nuts or what? Is he making money by telling stories, or is he real? I found out it was real. He was a very open kind of guy. Matter of fact, he reminded me of engineers that I've been working with. Matter of fact, all, left brain, logical process. Had no idea how it worked or what was going on with him. It just happened to him.
And how did Bob come across this?
Bob experienced it just, I guess in a way, sort of like I did. It just happened. He didn't try it. He wasn't going for that. He wasn't interested in psychic phenomena. It wasn't anything like that. It just happened to him, and it terrified him. What is this? He thought maybe he was dying. He thought maybe he was insane. He found a psychiatrist, I think. Charlie Tart maybe comes to mind. He found somebody. He went to them, and they said, Bob, you're sane. You're perfectly sane.
What was Bob's experience? Like, what was his particular revelation?
His experience was that he was taking a little nap, and he found himself outside his body, in the air, floating, looking back at his body. And that's what frightened him. So then after a bit, he realized, well, it keeps happening to me, whether I want it to or not. Charlie told me I was sane, so let's play with it. So he did. He started, playing with it, see where he could go, what he could do, what he could find out. His books that he wrote were all about his experiences, and his books are just like a diary. He'd go out of body, and I was going out to the lab like 15, 20 hours a week, spending with him, and he'd tell me about what he just saw the night before, that kind of thing. So he was doing it, and he was taking notes, writing it down, and pose questions the next time. So it was all just an organic thing that happened to him, and he started this. He built a building, called it a lab. Didn't have anything in it that looked like a lab. It's just a building. And it had three, what he called check units. I don't remember what check was, but Bob loves acronyms. He should have been a government employee. He loved acronyms. And he had these check units, and they were all isolated. One of them was electromagnetically isolated, a Faraday cage. And the other were just acoustically isolated. So you could go in one room and shout, and nobody would really hear you. They might hear a little bit of a peep. So anyway, he had this lab, and he was sort of like the build it and they will come. He built it, and he was, in his mind, some scientists would come and study consciousness because Bob wanted some science to explain to him, what this was and how it was working. He knew there was some mechanism involved. It wasn't just random stuff going on. There was some mechanism for some purpose, and he wanted to find out why. He didn't like being the weird guy, the crazy guy who had these weird things. He wanted it to be science. He wanted to understand it. So I was out there, and he looked at the whole group. I was there with about, 12 people or so. He looked at us. You guys are all technical. You're all scientists and engineers. I've got this lab. Anyone want to work with me? My hand shot up in the air right away. And somebody else that was there too, Dennis Mennery, his hand shot up too. Both of us had just gotten out of school. That's what you do when somebody asks you a question. Your hand goes up. There I was, a student, still sticking my hand up in the air, and he said, "Okay, a couple of weeks from now, come out to the lab," and so on. So that's what it got started.
So Bob's initial experience was completely organic, right? He was just taking a nap. It wasn't something he was searching for.
Yeah, just happened to him.
And then did he develop a protocol to get back to that state? Did he try different methods?
He did. He played with it, and I don't know that he tried many different methods. He very quickly came to the metaphor of, I just roll out. He would be lying in his body, and he would feel a pulsation state. And he measured it as best he could. He said it was around 4 hertz, 4 beats a second. And he'd feel this, he'd feel his body pulsating. He'd feel his mind, kind of pulsating. And when he got that pulsation state, he would just roll out, and he'd find himself out of body. And he wrote that in his books, and now there's 500,000 people lying in their bed. They're going like this, trying to roll out. But that was Bob's metaphor for his process.
Right.
And there's all sorts of processes, but all these processes are just nothing but tools. There isn't any process. Everything that's going on is going on in here. It doesn't have anything to do with whether you roll out or climb up a rope or do anything else. That's a tool that you use to try to get your mind in the place it needs to be. It's not really a tool that is fundamental or that works.
What would you describe it as? What are you trying to access? When you're doing this, when you're trying to achieve this state, consciously, what are you thinking?
What you're trying to access is what Bob called, you are asleep but wide awake. Asleep and awake at the same time. So your body goes to sleep, but your mind remains awake. And you are no longer co-located with your body. You're somewhere else. So that's the state. Whatever you is right now.
Yeah.
Now, he coined the word out of body. Before that, it was called astral projection, and a couple of other terms, but he coined the word out of body, and that's unfortunate because it makes people think that you are somehow inside your body, the soul or there's lots of different names for it, and that somehow comes out of your body and then goes experienced, but that's not the process. That's not what's going on.
What is the process?
The process is entirely consciousness. And what happens is you just shift your mind to a different data stream. In other words, our reality, well, maybe I got to start in the beginning. Go right to the bottom line, and nobody will understand it. And I think it's a little weird, but we can backfill later. And that is that we live in a virtual reality. This physical reality is computed. Now, it's being computed by consciousness. Consciousness is individual in us, but it's also, there's a system of consciousness, and we're just a piece of that system. Okay, so think of what that means. Virtual reality has some very fundamental attributes. 1, there's a computer. 2, there's a player. 3, the computer computes some virtual space that allows the players to see what's going on and who's interacting with who. So the virtual reality actually doesn't exist. It's just computer-generated eye candy for the players, so that the players know where everybody is on the field and what they're doing. So here you are, and you are not a human. That's an avatar. You are a piece of consciousness. You're a piece of consciousness that's a chip off the old block. You're a subset. Computer talk, you're a, what you call a virtual machine inside a larger machine. You know, that's kind of standard stuff. That's how a big mainframe can have 1,000 users. You get 1,000 virtual machines, so everybody has their memory, everybody has their processing, and so on. So anyway, that's what you are. You're a subset of this larger system. And I can make all of this, as weird as it sounds now, I can make all of this logic and science. This is not hand-waving. This is not conjecture. This is the way it works. And I have done the science very meticulously, and we can discuss that too. But this is the way it works. And this is the big paradigm shift that the sciences have been looking for the last 100 years, since quantum mechanics was started. And everybody realized that you know, they didn't really understand the world after all. So anyway.
So you are a piece of consciousness.
Yeah, you're a subset in this larger consciousness system. So you're getting a data stream. That data stream, you're the player. The data stream defines your reality. Just like if you're playing World of Warcraft, you get a data stream. That data stream is displayed as 1,000,000 pixels on your screen, and you look at those pixels and you see rivers and streams and people and houses. You know, you turn that data into physical reality. And that's the way it is with us. We're getting a data stream. Out of body, you just shift to a different data stream. There's other things going on. There's The Sims playing someplace else. You shift to a data stream, and now suddenly you're not in a World of Warcraft reality anymore. You're in a Sims reality. So that's how you really go out of body. It's entirely mental. It has nothing to do. It's just consciousness. It turns out all things paranormal, like out of body is a paranormal thing, all things paranormal happen with the intuitive side of your mind, not the intellectual side. And as much as people try to get there from the intellectual side, they'll fail. They can't do that. You have consciousness as two different ways of processing information. One is logically, that's the intellectual side, and the other is intuitively. Okay, that's the intuitive side. So you have these two pathways. Now in our culture, we work on that intellectual side, that logic side, and we hone that. You know, we start learning things in kindergarten and up, and we learn that, we hone it, we get good at it, we go to school, we go to graduate school. The intuitive side, you know, science tells us that it doesn't even exist. We don't work on it. But if you do work on it, if you put serious energy over a serious amount of time into that intuitive side, you find out that it's just as reliable, just as accurate as the intellectual side, except there's a big difference between them. On the intellectual side, you've got logic, but logic needs data. If you're going to use, you know, deductive logic, you've got to have data to plug in order to see what's logical. And most of the time, we don't have the data. The questions and the things we want to know that are really important, like should I marry Sally or should I marry Sue? There's no data that you can put in to come to a logical conclusion. And only the most trivial things do have. You know, where my car came from, or what my lunch. You know, when did I get out of the car? What jacket was I wearing? What pants was I wearing? You know, to go check the pockets. Then where did I go? And logic can help you out because it's a simple problem. But if it's a not so simple a problem, logic has its limitations because you don't have the data. On the intuitive side, it's totally beyond logic. There is no logic. You just know. It just happens. the information comes to you. It's intuitive. And on that side, it takes, just like the intellectual side, a lot of practice and a lot of work in order to hone that and educate it and understand it. But when you do, you get information. There is information available to you. There's a database out there, and that database is required. The reason it's there is because it's required for the rendering. You know, you have the larger conscious system configures a piece of itself to be the computer, and that computer, in order to compute this reality, needs information, needs data. So it creates a database from which it takes information and helps it create. So the rendering engine needs that, but you are really a piece of consciousness. That information is in the consciousness system. You're a piece of that, so you have access to it. The Hindus called that the Akashic records. That's what they called it. But everybody who has learned how to control and work with their intuitive side knows is that you can get information comes to you. Sometimes it's precognitive, that comes from the future promise database. Sometimes it's historical. Sometimes it's all kinds of data. So out of body is you just switch to a different data stream. Now you're in a different, what I call reality frame. So that's what that is. The paranormal, all of those things are just the way consciousness works. There's a few things about consciousness, a few facts of consciousness are one, all consciousness are netted. So you can interact with any other consciousness, and that includes your dog or your cat or other people, and you can trade information. And humans do that all the time, but they're not aware of it. You ever meet somebody and you just like them?
Yeah.
Or you just don't like them?
Yeah.
Yeah, you've traded some information there. There's a lot of things that come to people intuitively. Most of the best art and the best writing all comes out of that intuitive channel, where the artist has learned to work in that intuitive channel. It gets downloads, they call it. Again, a computer metaphor. So that exists, and very few people really learn to develop that intuitive side to the point that it is really reliable. Artists do, but only in as much as they can do their art. Or writers, only in so much as they get downloads about the plot and the story and the characters.
Muse.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things, though. The remote viewing, the healing with your mind. No, that's not data out of a database. There's another attribute of this system. It's kind of our feedback for us to see how we're doing, and that is that in this database, things are in terms of probability. Probabilities that thing will happen. What are the possibilities and all the probabilities of those possibilities? Okay, that's how the database is constructed, and it's constructed about the future. Okay, in the next 10 to the minus 44 seconds, what are the possibilities and what are the probabilities of each possibility? And the way the system works is that it takes a random draw from that probability distribution of the possibilities, and that's what happens next. Okay, understanding that lets you understand quantum physics and how it works, and lets you understand that the silly thing about the probability distribution collapses to a physical particle, because that doesn't make any sense. Probability distribution is mathematics. It's running in a computer someplace. How does mathematics running in a computer collapse to a physical particle? It makes no sense. That's not what's happening at all. What's happening is that reality is created by these when I say a random draw, it's not a random draw from the possibilities, but from the probability distribution of the possibilities. That means the things that are more likely have a higher probability of coming out. The things that are 1 in a million have a very low probability of being drawn, but sometimes they are drawn. Things happen 1 in a million now and again because sometimes they get drawn. Here's an example. A scientist gets a better telescope, and he's going to look into a piece of space farther out. Nobody's ever looked into that space before, so nobody knows what's there. So it's an unknown. Okay? So now humans do what we call in science, take a measurement. So he's got this new device. He looks up at this piece of sky with his telescope, and that's taking the measurement. When he takes the measurement, a random draw is taken from the probability distribution of all the possibilities. Okay, now there's lots of possibilities what might be in outer space. It could be one of, say, 1,000 things. But one, there's a constraint. It can't be something that doesn't fit. It can't be something that's cockeyed with what we already know. It has to kind of fit into historical background. So that's one constraint. But all the things that would fit in are still a large number. So then the random draw is taken. That's what he sees. That's the picture he gets. That's what's in his data stream that's defining his reality. Okay, now he stops. He says, great, took that picture. It's wonderful. I'm going to publish that. Okay, now when he does, that's known now, and anybody else who can look there will see the same thing. That's become part of our virtual reality. It's come into the virtual reality because that's how things come here. And a simpler metaphor or a simpler explanation would be, you dig a hole. You go to your backyard with a shovel and you dig a hole. What's going to be in there? Well, you live near the Gulf Coast, could be a gold doubloon. You might get a dinosaur bone. You might get a rock. You might get dirt or roots. And dig that dirt. Nobody knows what's in it. Random draw, probability distribution. That's what's in the dirt. Well, the highest probability is just going to be dirt and rocks and roots. But there's some probability, maybe 1 in 100,000 or 1 in a million or 1 in 10 million, that it's that gold doubloon if you're down near the Gulf Coast, where the Spaniards spent a lot of time exploring. So if that happens to come out of that random draw, then there's the gold doubloon there. So you see, our reality is not what people think. And I got there through a very circuitous path. I got there through understanding and learning and doing research in consciousness, basically paranormal things, and did research in the non-physical. I get out of body and I do things, paranormal things that had evidence, like remote viewing has evidence. You either got it right or you get it wrong. And I would then change a variable and do it again. Change a variable and do it again. And I could get back in the same state very precisely because I'd done it hundreds of times. And eventually, by varying one variable at a time, I figured out how it worked and why it worked. And there are a few things that are key to it. Like one is that consciousness is what's fundamental. That's the fundamental thing, is consciousness. Everything else is a subset of that. Everything else is derived from that. Now, that goes back, that idea goes all the way back to Plato with his analogy of people in a cave. And all they were aware of was the shadows on the wall. You're probably familiar with that. Mm-hmm. Everybody is. And those people were called idealists. Idealists believe that the physical world isn't really the fundamental thing. There's something behind that, something invisible, something we can't see, that we're not aware of. And the physical world is just the kind of the thing we interact with, but it's not the real thing. The real thing's behind it. Idealists. So they turned out to be correct. That is right. But the idealists got stuck. And if you talk to idealists now, you'll see what they're stuck on is that, well, and that most of them at this point think that consciousness is that thing that's out there. And you say, well, if consciousness is fundamental, then you need to be able to derive physics from it. So can you do that? And they say, well, no, they can't. But I can, and I did. I can derive physics. I can derive quantum physics. So I know how quantum physics works, and it's not weird science at all. It's a logical science, just like all the rest of the branches of science. Once you understand it, all those mysteries just fall out.
Fitness isn't just about what you do in the gym, it's also about your nutrition, but even with the best diet, some nutrients can be hard to get, and AG1 can help fill those gaps. AG1 delivers optimal amounts of nutrients in forms that help your body perform. AG1 makes foundational nutrition easy because there aren't a million different pills and capsules you have to keep track of. It's just one scoop mixed in water. It's such an easy routine to keep in the mornings. Ingredients in AG1 are selected for absorption, nutrient density, and potency, and are intentionally picked to work in sync with the whole formula for optimal impact. They are seriously committed to quality. AG1 is tested for hundreds of contaminants and impurities, and they're constantly reformulating their recipe to dial it in. This is all part of why I've partnered with AG1 for years. So get started with AG1 this holiday season and get a free bottle of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase at drinkag1.com/Joe Rogan. That's a $76 value gift for free if you go to drinkag1.com/Joe Rogan. Seriously, get on this. I'd like to get back to that, but I want to talk to you about intuition.
Okay.
Intuition is something that some people struggle with. Have you determined any psychological barriers that exist that might be a part of some people's personality or some people's way of viewing the world that inhibits them from correctly interpreting intuition?
Absolutely. There's a lot of things that inhibit using the intuitive data stream. The data stream is available to everybody. You know, everybody can develop it.
But why are some people like yourself like instantaneously almost successful with it, whereas other people their whole life they struggle?
Pick your hero.
I was
I'm not judging.
well, I hate to say this because it sounds kind of tooting my own horn, but
Go ahead.
Fear.
yeah, I came here for a purpose, okay, and learning and saying these things, saying the things I'm saying, offering up this information is one of those purposes. So
You mean you came here into this existence?
I came here into this existence for that. So I've been around a few times, and over the last couple of my lifetimes, I was preparing for this assignment, and then when it came, that's why when I sat down and meditated for the first time, I was gone.
So you think you've had many lives where you've been on this path?
30 seconds before you attack.
Yes.
Get ready.
And I'll get back to the question of what those problems are, but yes, and I don't come to that since I call it experience packets, because I don't like to use words that are attached to religion. I don't call it incarnation. It's an experience packet. Anyway, I don't come to that conclusion because it sounded good or I liked it or the Buddha agreed with it. I come to that conclusion because I have this logical, scientific model of reality.
It's like a
And
fairy tale.
that you
Complete
live
with an
multiple
evil
lives
sever.
is a logical piece of that.
How so?
Well, it goes back to the purpose of why we're here. So we're kind of jumping around a lot, but maybe we'll get it all pulled together. There is a purpose. Why we're here, why there's individuated units of conscious has a purpose. All of this has to have happened that way. This model of reality that I have is a logical model, and it's not a logical model in the sense that these things could happen, but these things must happen. You can reduce the logic down. There's only one path that really works, and that path leads us to be here for a purpose and a reason, and that requires us to where was I going with that? That requires us to make choices, and those choices depend whether or not we and the system evolves or de-evolves. It's a part of this larger
Let's get into some
process of how things work. Okay. What was that past question?
Well, we started off with intuition. What are the psychological barriers that keep people from recognizing intuition correctly?
Right. Yeah, well, then we pop to something else, But let's talk about that. Let's go back to that.
Okay.
One of the main things in our culture, now I say our culture, because there's other cultures that don't have as many barriers to intuitive connections. Our culture values the intellect. above all things. If you want to be successful in the world, you need to learn to learn that intellect. You need to speak properly. You need to understand things. You need to read books. You need to learn. Now, whether you do that in a school or whether you do that on your own, doesn't matter. But you need to learn. We value it. We don't really understand or therefore value the intuitive side very much right now. That means we're out of balance. We've got these two different ways of processing, and our intellectual side is developed. Our intuitive side was probably better when we were 2 years old than it is now. So it's atrophy. Now, this unbalance causes that intellectual side to be dominant. Actually kind of plays the role of the bully. It's dominant. When you start doing things on the intuitive side, that intellect jumps in front. So let's say you want to talk to your dead Uncle Fred. So you close your eyes, you get in a meditation state. You go, Uncle Fred, are you out there? And you hear yeah, I'm here. Intellect jumps in and says, what was that? Did I just make that up? Is that in my imagination? What was that? Well, the intellect butted in, doing analysis, trying to make judgments, and the intuitive process is gone. It breaks it. So that's one of the biggest things, because we're so out of balance in our Western culture. Western culture's all over the world now. It's a world culture. It's the culture of manufacturing and business and that sort of thing. So anyway, that's the biggest thing that keeps people from going there is their intellect. They have to work through that intellect, always butting in to it. Now, another thing is, let's say, and it's all tied to the intellect, another big problem in those people who want to learn this, I really like to learn this, I want to experience it firsthand, they have a desire, a strong desire to go out of body, to be able to heal, remote view. I want to do it. All right, so they close their eyes and they get in their meditation state and they think, I want to do this, I want to do this. They'll never do it because their intellect is in the process of wanting them to do it. It's a need they have. So if you try too hard, you prohibit it. If you really want to do it to a point that it's important to you, you inhibit it. The people who are most successful are the people who come in and, I don't know, could be true, could be false. I'll just go through the motions and see what happens. They're relaxed, they're open, and, you know, like this one I teach all these things, and I have a course you can get on my website that'll explain to you how to go out of body and how to do all these things, how to heal with your mind, how it works, why it works, what you can do, what the problems are. I give you a binaural beat to put you in a meditation state, and then I explain it to you, then I give you a chance to go do it. You come back, we discuss it,
I don't think I can handle
you go
the
back,
pressure of the dark
do it.
force.
You know, it's this practice thing. It loops. It's like a 5-day program, and I've reduced it to 5 days worth of audio because the pictures really don't matter. And it's at my website. But anyway, so I've had a lot of experience with people trying to do these things. I've talked to thousands of people outside the teach. And the ones that are successful, like this one girl, sits down and she gets a remote viewing targets. The way you do that, you go to a site on the web, and there's pictures associated with numbers. And you ask for 10. And they'll give you 10 numbers. Each one of these numbers is associated with a very particular picture, and your job is to remote view the picture.
I'm gonna wait for healer.
So she'd never done it before, and she was very casual with it. And she goes through and she did 12 of them. 12 of them. And after the 12th one, you know, she's writing them all down on the paper. Oh, okay, this number, I got this and this and this. The next number, I got this. And she's drawing pictures and writing them down on paper. And she got done through 12, and she said, well, before I do any more of this, let me go back and see how I did. She got 12 right, spot on. She said, wow, she was blown away. She actually squealed. Got everybody's attention in the room, you know. And then she thought, oh, I'm good at this, I can do this. The next 5, wrong. Didn't get any of it, because now she was involved with it. Her intellect was interfering with it. She wanted to do it. She knew she was good. Like, if I could do that without trying, I should be able to do better if I try. No, if you try, you won't do it at all. So the attitude that succeeds is a very casual attitude that's just open to things and is not trying. It's not, doesn't have, it's just open. And then it happens much more easily. Now, when it does happen, if the person is in denial, that's another thing. If you've got this belief, strong belief that it's impossible, or even a strong belief that maybe it's possible, but you can't do it, then as soon as things happen, your intellect will jump in with that belief and it's gone. So yeah, there's lots of things. Now, here's another thing that is a problem, and that is that people who haven't trained themselves constantly have stuff going through their mind. I mean, if you look at a EEG, it's all over the place. If you look at those colored pictures you get out of the computer, you see they're colored and this and they're changing. These are thoughts and things constantly going through your mind. Well, if you're just open to information coming and your mind has got all this background noise in it, it's hard to pick a signal out of the noise. So that's why people say, well, first step is to meditate. Because that's an exercise where you learn to quiet your mind, get rid of the noise. So a typical person has a pretty noisy mind, and that's a problem. But that just takes some discipline to get rid of the noisy mind. So these are some of the things that inhibit it from happening in kind of the average Westerner. They get out of balance, too much intellect. They either want to do it or they're convinced it's impossible. Both of those will shut it off. They
What is happening? What is happening when you want to do it that's interfering? What is happening with the intellect when the intellect interferes? Like, what is disturbing or disrupting the signal?
It's like the intellect is up on the edge of its chair, looking, watching, ready. I want to talk to my dead Uncle Fred. Okay, where is he? It's the intellect's in charge now. It's your intellect that's looking to try to find. You're not just relaxed, letting that intuitive channel open up and receive.
So when you define consciousness, what is the intellect?
Well, it's a way of processing information. And basically it's using logic as the process. That's the intellect. I've had these experiences and here's what they've done, and that means that if I have another one like that, it'll probably be a similar outcome. All of that is using inductive mostly, but also deductive logic where there's enough information. That's the intellectual
how is that
side.
interfering with the intuitive?
It's blocking the intuitive. It is, basically you can say it's bullying the intuitive side. You got these two sides, one strong, one's weak. You say, I want to talk to my dead Uncle Fred. Intellect jumps over and says, all right, I'm on it. Where is he? Intuitive side's sitting down there not engaged. The intellect is in charge, running the program. It's the one looking, but it can't ever find anything.
Right, and if you are a piece of consciousness, you're a piece of a collective consciousness. Like, what is the logical? Like, what is the intellect? Like, what is the purpose that's serving?
Oh, the purpose that it's the intellect is serving is that it's part of our choice-making process. We make choices. And I have to go back to the very beginning because we're walking in through this kind of backwards. So
Pick your
we're
hero
here
or
to
villain.
evolve the
I'm
quality
not
of our
judging.
consciousness. Okay, the consciousness system is a real system and it's evolving. It doesn't want to be evolved. Maybe I should start there and kind of work up to where we are now, and then a lot of questions will be answered. They'll fall out. All right, so let's start at the beginning, and there's two strands here that I want to do together. One of them is think of a system, and that is an information system. Okay, just general words, just an information system. And let's say in this information system, all the bits are random.
Get ready.
Okay, no information. Random bits defines no information. So what this, if this information system is actually going to evolve, it has to order some of those bits. So it orders those bits in a particular way, and the ordering isn't so important as it is that once it has an order that is of certain form, it can then make that stand for a number or a letter or something else. You know, a buffalo, you know, it can make, here's this ordering and I will give it a meaning. Okay, so it can do that. Now, as soon as it does that, it orders those bits. It now has information. Okay, so what an information system does is it evolves, becomes greater, evolves by lowering its entropy. Ordering things lowers entropy. Entropy is a measure of disorder. So all that it's random is the highest entropy that system can have. Order things, that entropy goes down a little bit. That's how that works. So if you have an aware information system, now this information system is conscious. It's aware, and it knows it has to order bits. That is its path of evolution. If it takes the bits and pulls them apart, now it's back to all random and it's dead. It's not an information system anymore. So it wants to evolve
Wait for the team before you go back in.
by creating more information. Right? Those bits that are defined to be a particular way, that's information. So it wants to create information. That's its. So the purpose of this aware information system is to lower its entropy. So that's one thing
Why are we
that we have to
rolling,
understand. Now, let's look at consciousness. A lot of people say, nobody knows what consciousness is. Consciousness is easy to define. This is awareness with a choice.
Okay, push in the mid.
It's just that simple. It's awareness with a choice. Awareness of what's out there, what's in here, both self and outside. Well, it's awareness. Okay, now, what does awareness have? How does it do that? How does it know what's going on? It has to get data. So it goes out and gets data. Now for us, that data comes through 5 senses. We hear it, we see it, we feel it, we smell it, we taste it. That's it, we've got 5 senses. So our awareness has information. It gets, oh, this is an apple, this is a chair. And it learns to deal with that information. The second thing it has to have is it has to have memory. If you don't have memory, everything you notice is the first thing you've ever noticed.
Okay, DPS
To build something,
trash.
to evolve, memory. Okay? You
Someone
also
swap
have
the
to
heel.
have some processing. You have to be able to look at those things in that memory and say, well, what do they mean? You know, what's the connection? What does this tell me? You have to make some kind of sense out of it to help you find your purpose, which is more order, lower entropy. Okay, so now we take the simplest form of consciousness. Simplest form of consciousness is, remember, conscious awareness. You know, awareness has memory, has processing, has a purpose. It's entropy. So that would be just a piece of aware consciousness that could be in state A or state B. That's it, binary. Simple state. So it can say, oh, I'm aware, and I'm aware that I'm in state A. Right? That's an awareness. And I can change that to state B. I've got 2 different states. I can be in simple binary. And I can remember that. And now I can change it. Now I can change it again. Now I went from a 0 to a 1 to a 0 to a 1 to a 1. And I can remember that. Okay, so it can evolve by creating patterns. That 1, you know, that 0, 1, 1, 0, that's a pattern. So it can make patterns, and it can work with those patterns and evolve by making patterns of patterns and so on. And now it can take one, just one, well, let me put it this way. There's 2 ways to proceed here, and it doesn't matter which way, they all end up at the exact same place. And that is, it all then, all the patterns of patterns of patterns created are in
30
memory
seconds before you
of this
attack.
cell.
Get ready.
So it's just its memory. Or you can say, if you follow the biological model, that it is, that it duplicates itself.
Name your price.
You know, like another virtual machine. It duplicates itself. So now you have two of these. And this one's in a 1, and this one's in a 0, and another. So you can do that. So one of them follows like our evolution here, biology. You know, we started with single-cell amoebas, and then they split, and you had multiple cell things, and then you had things that specialized, like in organs, and then you had things like us that had lots of different organs and specialized stuff. And we have a you know, I've heard us described as a cooperative organization of about 4 trillion bacteria, or 4 trillion single-cell things that are all cooperating and working together. So complexity builds. So we can do that. Complexity can build with numbers of things, or it can build just a number of things. All right, so let's say this thing is growing. It's lowering its entropy. And it'll get to a point where it's done all the patterns that it can think to do, and it kind of stalls out. All right, then it can take one of its little cells and just oscillate it from 0 to 1 to 0 to 1 to 0 to 1. Just invented a metronome. Now, it can use that one, just sitting there going 0 to 1, to create regular time. And now it can have sequences of patterns of sequences. It can more complexity. What that does, and that's when regular time was invented. It's a technology consciousness creates. So then we have it growing. It's more and more order. And of course it's learning as it goes, because arithmetic is a natural for this thing. I've got one thing, I've got 2 things, I've got another 2 things, oh, I've got 4 things, you know, I mean, that's just natural. So it's going to explore that. It's going to get good at math and so on, just kind of naturally. So it's growing. It gets to a point where it's stalled out again. It hits another plateau. It's this one big monolithic consciousness now that has thought of just about everything that it can think of. Because it's just one thing, and it realizes that in order to grow further, I need to break off pieces of myself and give them independent free will. And now, we hadn't discussed free will up to this time, but our little unit that I started with, that simple thing that was binary, had to have free will. It had to be able to choose between a or a B, or a 1 or a 0. So free will was that it could freely choose which one to bring up. So anyway, so it realizes that it has to do this. Well, our cells, basically did the same kind of thing. They had to split, and each one was an independent cell that now had to cooperate. So it said, I need to split. So it did. It created a bunch of virtual machines. That's what we are. We're one of those virtual machines. That got it off of its plateau, because now these virtual machines have their own free will, and the source can say, all right, everybody line up, here's what we're going to do next. And they can go, don't feel like it, boss. I'm going fishing. They can do their own thing. Now you have a bunch of different perspectives on things, a bunch of different attitudes, and the various pieces didn't all go through the same, didn't all go through the same process. They all have their own processes, making their own choices in their own way. So now you're getting a much richer set of possibilities that you had when it was one monolithic thing. All right, now this whole set this whole thing is growing up with its subset pieces is what I'm calling the larger consciousness system. And the first virtual reality, and a virtual reality is simply a rule set. It says, here's the rules. Everybody that obeys these rules, then they're part of this reality because they can share things. The first virtual reality was protocols for language, for talking. So the system creates that. All these subpieces can communicate with each other. They have syntax, they have definition. so they can talk. So now you've got this big chat room. It's a good metaphor. And all these subsets and the main parent, is still there. And they have this communication. Well, that creates a lot more opportunities for growth. But that also stalls out. Because the way the system works, its whole point is to lower its entropy. And the possibilities that all of these things interacting with each other creates a lot of possibilities, but the possibilities aren't all that interesting. After a while, what do you do with 100,000 things in a big chat room? It kind of